Hello and welcome, my friends. Welcome back to Triple Press exclusive week in review, week 6, the Commanders round. Quite a few things happened this week. Lots of good matches. We've got some shuffling in the scores, and we've got a pretty wide margin between the top half and the bottom half, and we'll get to that in just a second. I am, of course, Omar Krieg, your Lord and Commander for the Krieg Dominion, and this is, as I mentioned, Triple Press week in review for week 6. Starting off, here are our standings as of the completion of this previous week. The Industrialists remain in number 1, followed closely, very, very closely, by the Golden Suns. Only 1 point separating the two, as you can see there. We have the Lyran Debutantes in third place now, followed very closely by the Luthien Dragonborn. Again, 1 point separating them, and only 5 points between the fourth place and the first place teams. Debutantes and Dragonborn did a little swaparoo in the third and fourth positions, and then we ended up with a tie for fifth with 35 points for the Canopian Honeybees and the Cyan Spirits, with the Spirits having won their match this week. Let's see. We've also got the Rock City Wolverines moving up from from 10th to 7th. Torian Nationals dropping 2. Dover Crows also dropping 2, and the Remoran opposition taking up the bottom of the pack. As you can see, there's been some movement. The Rock City Wolverines scored a bunch of points, and we'll talk about how that match quickly became wild celebration and sudden catastrophe. We'll talk about that in a moment. Looking at our kills, I've adjusted the counting of the top 10 or so of the individual pilot kills. Clift dominating with 8 kills, followed then by a three-way tie with Vampsy, Pritha, and Zhao, all with 5 kills apiece. And then, of course, we have Bui with 4. 3 of those that Bui gained just this past week. And then you can see the rest there. So what I've done there is anybody with 2 or more kills that has not been drafted is currently being tracked as that leaderboard shuffles out a little bit more distinctly. We'll see that reducing over time, I imagine. Team kills are kills by team. Debutantes are leading solidly with 13 total kills. Dragonborn and Industrials tied at 11, and then the Golden Suns with 10. Then, of course, we have the rest of the teams: Crows, Honeybees, Nationals, Wolverines, Spirits, and Opposition, rounding out the bottom 6 there. Wealth and growth. We've got a couple of big changes here this week. The biggest one was a lot more money in the pot for each of the individual matches, simply because of the extra points being involved with the Commanders round. Of course, with killing the opponent commander mech gave you 10 points, and if your own commander mech was still alive, which was often the case, you also got an additional 5 points. And of course, the total score is what determines the wealth for the teams. The winning team gaining an additional 10 wealth on top of the score total. Biggest things also, we've got Lyran Debutantes currently in negotiations for opening up their own stadium. The Golden Suns have completed their negotiations for their stadium, so those numbers are going to change slightly as these two teams have either begun or completed their purchasing operations, I guess you could say, for their stadiums. It should be noted as well, down at the bottom, the opposition, this week they only had a total loss of -2 in wealth. I thought that was actually a pretty nice little move on their part, despite their recent trending of losing. Moving on, now we have the draft. Draft hit hard for a couple teams this week. Golden Suns lost 3 of their pilots and techs, and this bumped them all the way up to the top of the roster with 6 total draftees, as well as the Industrialists having lost 2 draftees this week. Honeybees and Spirits also lost 2 pilots or techs each, and somehow the Dover Crows have managed to evade the draft entirely after 6 weeks of competition. Just a couple of notes I wanted to point out there. Let's talk about the individual matches and the individual teams. Canopian Honeybees now sitting at 3 wins and 3 losses. They took on the Science Spirits, and they managed to isolate the Spirits Light Mech, which I believe was a fire starter. And they put on some really hard damage on the Spirits' brand new Cataphract. But in the end, it just wasn't enough to take out the Spirits commander, which I believe was a Thunderbolt in that fight. And they ended up losing. Couldn't tell there. Davion Golden Suns, 5 wins, 0 losses, and 1 draw. One of 2 teams to have held a draw, and still the only team undefeated. They took on the Dover Crows this week, and that was a very interesting match. It was probably the best match of the week insofar as me watching a fight take place. Through perseverance and eventually slightly better positioning, the Golden Suns took the win, but they really had to work for it. We'll talk a little bit about the Crows and Talus and the way he played them when we get to the Crows section, but it was just an incredibly entertaining match to watch, in my opinion. Speaking of the Crows, 2 wins, 4 losses. The Crows executed some interesting tactical maneuvers to minimize the amount of fire coming at them, but ultimately the Suns won, despite their best efforts. Let me tell you, there was a round or two where things happened that in Mega Mech they can, but in tabletop it wouldn't have, and that was simply because the Crow's Imp went prone with a level 1 terrain hex directly next to it, which should have blocked the majority of the incoming fire. But of course, Mega Mech didn't realize that. So I think if that had been coded slightly different in the Mega Mech programming, that match may have gone a little bit differently. I think the Crows were doing really, really well with their positioning, but again, in the end, between the Mega Mech snafu and just overall performance by the 2 teams, it may not have ended up the same way. It could have. It would have been interesting to see the Crows take out the Golden Suns, one of the top teams in the league, beaten by an expansion team. Luthien Dragonborn, talking about another one of the powerful teams in the league. This was pretty much a lopsided fight. The opposition certainly gave it their best. But in the end, the Dragonborn won, and they ended up farming pretty much every single point they could out of that match, short of an ammunition explosion taking out a mech. So they win, and they are now 5 wins and 1 loss moving into round 7. Lyran Debutantes, 4 wins and 2 losses. They took on the Torian Nationals. A new mech kill contender has risen up, challenging Alexandra Clift. Nini Bui took all 3 kill shots in her Jenner after the Marauder 2 and Wolverine softened them up. There may or may not be some claims of kill steals going on within the Debutantes camp, but regardless, it was a Debutantes victory. Pretty good fight. It was actually pretty interesting how Bui ended up with all the kill shots, and I don't know if James intended it to happen or if it was just a matter of the Jenner getting the last bit of damage in for all 3 of the opponent mechs. But it is what it is, and now Clift has someone trying to take her spot at the top. But, of course, Bui's got a little ways to go, as we saw a moment ago. American Industrialist, 4 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw. This was a very interesting match. I personally, as I was playing as the Wolverines, made a major mistake towards the end of the match. If you haven't seen the video, you should go back and watch the Rock City Wolverines take on the American Industrialists. But briefly, let me just kind of summarize here. Heavily contested match right up to the end, but the Merrics were able to capitalize on a stall on the Wolverines' part to end up scoring just enough points to win the match. I think ultimately what happened there was I forgot that even though the victory condition was to kill the commander, you still had to actually finish the round versus, if you'd done /defeat. Traditionally, the custom is if there's a /victory/defeat way to end the match, both players just kind of don't do anything, and the match ends at that point, regardless of whatever might happen on the screen. And that was not the case, as I was playing against the bot, who was, being a bot, didn't adhere to any customs or traditions or what have you, and continued to fire and took out the Wolverines commander mech, and we had to score it as such. I thought it made kind of funny for a story like that to turn out that way. Anyway, go back and watch the video. It's should be entertaining in that regard. At the end of the day, of course, the Industrialists won, and the Rock City Wolverines have yet to score a win. Romoran opposition, 2 wins, 4 losses. They took on the Luthien Dragonborn, and as mentioned previously, despite their best efforts, the Dragonborn just walked all over the opposition. They just beat them it was a lopsided match. Let's just call it that. I think the opposition went out there and they tried their best, but it just very clearly was not enough. Rock City Wolverines, we talked about this a second ago. I want to point out that, the Wolverines on paper should be a fairly decent team, and yet they have not yet scored a single victory in 2/3 of regular season competition. Not surprisingly at this point, Wolverines put up a hell of a fight against the Industrialists, and for a few brief seconds actually won the match. And the story is that they started celebrating far too early, and because of this distraction and loss of focus, the Industrialists managed to get the commander kill, and because they had already taken out a heavier mech earlier in the match than what the Wolverines had done, they actually ended up scoring just enough points to win the match. So if you haven't seen the video, I've pretty much spoiled it, but just go back and watch it anyway. It's pretty entertaining. At least I thought it was. Cyan Spirits, 2 wins and 4 losses. They lost this week to the Canopian Honeybees. I'm sorry, I misspoke. They won against the Canopian Honeybees. Just a relentless fusillade of, I don't even know if I said that right, but just constant fire raining down on the Honeybees commander mech, ultimately proving to be too much, despite the fact that in this match, the Honeybees had managed to get the Firestarter out of position and away from being able to do any rear shots or any other things that you might expect from a light mech on the field, especially when it's four heavy mechs and 2 light mechs between the 2 teams. And then lastly, with the Torian Nationals, now they're not 2 wins and 3 losses. That should be 2 wins and 4 losses. They took on the Lyran Debutantes, and as I mentioned here, a pair of Warhammers was still not enough to challenge the Debutantes' newest mech, a Marauder 2. Even when there's a general running around stealing its kills. I had to put that little joke in there. I thought it was funny. The Nationals fought. It was just not well enough to keep the loss off the record books. And again, it should be 2 wins and 4 losses. Moving on, bracket projection. What we're looking at, if we were to start the playoff process with the standings as they currently are. There's been a little bit of shuffling around. The biggest moves were more in the preliminary rounds, although a couple teams in the quarterfinals around there changed position, but ultimately didn't really change the overall outlook. We would start with the Wolverines taking on the opposition, and the Nationals taking on the Crows to determine the last 2 positions for the quarterfinal round. Still looking pretty much more or less overall the same. I think the only thing that changed was just the where is it? There was one of the teams that was in the bottom 4, now they're in the top 6. Yeah, the Cyan Spirits. They're listed here as number 6. Their current standing is actually number 5, but they're tied, and the Honeybees have a slightly better record, so I put them in number 5 and the Spirits in number 6. But otherwise, it wouldn't really change a whole lot, other than obviously who they fight first. Week 7 matches. We got 2 player versus player matches coming up in Week 7. We've got the Davian Golden Suns, Foehammer taking on the Lyran Debutantes. That's Grimdark James. That is going to be an interesting match to watch, just because of the 2 players in particular. Foehammer, of course, with his character, the Countess Skylar Hawk and Davian, and the Lyran Debutantes, Grimdark James. I've worked with both of them quite a bit over the last several months with the Blood Bowl Sevens League that James is running, and both of them are a joy to play against in any game, it would seem. And then the other player versus player match will be interesting to watch too. We've got a very well seasoned BattleTech Mega Mech player in Darius heading up the Luthien Dragonborn, taking on the Dover Crows, who, with my oldest son, Talus, very inexperienced overall in basically anything BattleTech related that wasn't already a video game out there. But somehow, despite all that, he is still managing to fight and pull off some interesting moves that, frankly, I wouldn't expect in someone who is not so well-versed or experienced in this site and in this sort of thing. So that's going to be an interesting match to watch as well. And then we have the Toria Nationals hosting the Canopian Honeybees for our fifth player involved match, or excuse me, our fifth player in a match. And then the last two here in italics, the Remoran Opposition versus the Rock City Wolverines, and the Cyan Spirits versus the American Industrialists. More than likely, what I will do is another streamed live doubleheader as I had done previously. I want to say it was week 2 or maybe it was week 3. I don't remember now. But whatever week it was that I did it, I'm going to do it again. It'll be a streamed event, doubleheader. We'll do both matches in the same streaming session, and then we'll take it from there. All right. Lastly, Olaf's predictions. Of course, I'm Omar Krieg. Olaf Krieg is Omar's uncle or something. I've never really fully fleshed it out, but as far as character concepts go, Olaf is an uncle or something. Olaf's predictions, of course, are with the Golden Suns versus the Debutantes. Countess Davian's been a good lead for the team. Olaf's not entirely sure how exactly. But this new Baron Isaac Weissman for the Debutantes, he's really turned the tables around for them and really brought this team around. As you can tell, they're sitting at 4-2, which is better than the Debutantes have done in any previous season, I think. So this is going to be an interesting match, and Olaf is predicting the Debutantes will win, but most likely it'll be a very, very close match. When it comes to the Dragonborn versus the Crows, Olaf has this to say. This could be a very friendly match, friendly rivalry and whatnot, but given that they're both Draconis Combine-based teams, it would not surprise Olaf that this becomes one of two options, one being a lasting alliance or a deadly feud. We've got two teams that come from more or less the same cultural background, so it'll be interesting to see how this turns out in that regard. Don't discount the Crows, however. Olaf says the Dragonborn are most likely going to win, but don't put anything past the Crows. Don't rule them out just yet because they are unpredictable, as we have seen in the Golden Suns match this past week and pretty much any other match that the Crows have been in prior to. With the Nationals versus the Honeybees, Olaf, of course, favors. Let me back up. I started going down the wrong line there. Olaf really likes the Honeybees, and as you can see, he claims that they're his favorite periphery team, of which there are 3 or 4. So obviously Olaf is going to go for the Honeybees, and frankly, Honeybees versus Nationals, you'd be a fool to bet on the Nationals, given both teams' track records. And as Olaf says here, Honeybees will take the win, and it probably won't even be hard. Opposition versus the Wolverines. Olaf says he likes these Wolverines. They're spunky, and they have yet to back down from a fight no matter who they're up against. The problem here is, of course, that they're up against the opposition. And most likely what will happen is the opposition has a pretty good chance of winning, even though Olaf wants the Wolverines to win. Olaf always favors the underdog. Let's see. Spirits versus Industrialists. A rematch, as it turns out, from the 30-22 championship match. Olaf says he likes the Industrialists, and he'll favor them 9 out of 10 times, but he's curious also what would happen if the Spirits pulled off a win and what kind of dust-up that's going to cause on the leaderboards. And frankly, if the Spirits win this match, that will shake a few things up. It will see at least 1 or 2 teams displace the Industrialists, as well as, of course, the Spirits moving up. So it would definitely be a big shakeup if the Spirits end up winning this match. Olaf does say, however, it'll most likely be the Industrialists by the end. And I think that's my last slide. Yep, that's my last slide. So that's all we got for the week in review for week 6. Coming up, of course, we've got those matches. I will be releasing sometime in the next day or two my schedule. The schedule may get disrupted slightly by 2 things. One being the Thanksgiving holiday for the U.S., as well as for my job, what I do when I'm not playing on the computer. My work volume may increase, so and that's because of the holidays. So I will have time slots available sometime in the next day or 2. Start getting matches scheduled. We'll start getting matches underway. And then we can see how week 7 turns out and start looking for the following couple of competition weeks. In the meantime, my friends, we are going to wrap it up. thanks for stopping by. Thanks for hanging out. Hope you enjoyed what you see. In the link, or excuse me, in the description below is a link for our Discord server. If you like what you see with the Greyland Trios League content, please consider stopping by, hanging out, joining the community. Obviously, you can push all the other buttons on the screen, the like, the subscribe, the whatevers. Those are always appreciated as well. But for me personally, it's all about growing the community and having a bunch of people that we can hang out with and talk shit to, because that's what I enjoy doing. In the meantime, I'm going to get out of here because at this point I'm starting to ramble and I'm running out of things to say that are pertinent to the GTL and the weekend review. So we'll see you around next time. Have a good one, my friends.